What's up? How's it going? Not a whole lot of time for introductions, but this video is labeled Second Pandemic. I want to jump right into this. This is totally off topic what we normally do, but this has personal ramifications in my life. So I am here to give you some information that I found. So just to give you a little background on me, I am a 45-year-old male. I have several kids, run a business, real busy. And for the last, back in 2020, I got COVID, and I never felt like I fully recovered and have been dealing with long-term, they would say, COVID effects. I never got vaccinated. There was always something kind of suspicious about the whole way they pushed it on you, and they were forcing people to do it. Never got vaccinated, but here up until recently, I haven't had any blood work done in a long time. Had some blood work done and found out that my vitamin D was bottomed out. And there's only two ways really to get vitamin D. Number one, it's from the sun. And number two is from food or supplements. Fish are they have a tremendous amount of vitamin D in fish. What is interesting is that vitamin D is almost essential for a full immune response. And these two gentlemen on the TV here on the screen, these two guys are from the medical field, and they basically go over how important vitamin D is, and they talk about this second pandemic. I'm going to give you three things right now. Number one, stop wearing sunscreen. Stop. They're going to show you a chart of how wearing sunscreen basically makes you sicker. And if you think about it, humans lived on the earth for thousands of years. Sunscreen was just recently invented 20, 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Well, how did they deal with the sun 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago or 2,000 years ago? Did Jesus wear sunscreen? I'm just curious. He lived in the Middle East. Anyway, stop wearing sunscreen. It's a scam. It's a hoax. Number two, eat more fish. And number three is you need to get a vitamin D supplement. Now, I have this vitamin D supplement. Let's see if we pull it up here. Where you at? This one right here. You have to make sure you get the right vitamin D supplement, and this is the one I highly recommend for you. I'll put a link in the description. But this particular vitamin D supplement is really, there has to be, and they'll talk about it in the video, but basically what it is vitamin D has to have something else with it in order for it to get into your system, and you can't just take a vitamin D supplement today or eat fish today and your vitamin D levels come up. It takes a period of time, and I can vouch for what they're fixing to tell you, because about 45 days after taking this vitamin D supplement, I feel tremendously better. So we're going to jump right into it and listen to these guys, and I will stop it and cut it and jump around to a couple of points to highlight what it is they're talking about, so you don't have to watch the whole thing. If you do want to watch the whole thing, I'll put a link in the description, and you can watch the whole video there.
Well, you are most welcome to this video, and I'm delighted to have with us today Dr. David Grimes. Dr. Grimes, welcome.
Thank you, John. Very nice of you to invite me.
Now, I've been looking forward to this because Dr. Grimes has been a physician for a long, long time, medical researcher, medical author, and he's been through the whole development of vitamin D and the understanding of vitamin D and the importance of vitamin D for health and for immunity. So we're going to get some really good insights if you want to stick around for this video. And we've got some PowerPoint slides here, David, haven't we, to look at. So shall we start off with the first slide, and you can tell us what it's about.
Well, basically...
We're starting with this one.
No.
Oh, I want to go back. Okay, right.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
You can put me on as well if you like.
No, you're on. Oh, okay, right.
Yeah. Basically, I've had an interest in vitamin D for a long time. I'm not what might be called a trained expert in vitamin D, but I've acquired a lot of knowledge and experience through my work as a physician, working mainly in East Lancashire in Blackburn. And what concerned me initially was that there were groups of people who were very susceptible to illness and a short life. And these were in particular the poor people, people in the northwest of England compared to the southeast, and also the South Asian ethnic immigrants into Blackburn, of which there are a large number. And I thought, well, what's the common feature? And that's what we must look at, common features. This is what's called Occam's razor. What do these people have in common? The South Asian ethnic people, the poor people, the obese people, and people living in the inner cities and in the northwest of England in particular. And I came to the conclusion the only thing that we could explain would be the climate, sun exposure, and vitamin D. And I did quite a lot of work on that. Now, in 1968-69, I was the resident medical officer at the Manchester Royal Infirmary. And at Christmas time, we saw the onset of the pandemic of Hong Kong flu. And it was pandemonium in the hospital. There was no planning for it. It just happened. And we had to deal with it when it came along. We didn't have any intensive care units in those days. There was no public health initiative. There was no government involvement. But we got on with it and we dealt with it. And after about 3 months, the pandemic went away, and that was the end of it. A little bit later in the year, but nothing very much. Now, when it came to the COVID-19 pandemic, which we were anticipating at the beginning of 2020, I thought, now, we now know a lot more than we did in 1969. We know now how to improve immunity. We know now about vitamin D and its importance in the development of immunity. And we should be able to do better than in 1968-69. And in 68-69, there were about 50,000 deaths. So I confidently thought, right, we're going to do far better than that with the COVID-19. I fully expected medical science, government, public health to mobilise the knowledge of vitamin D. But it didn't happen.
This is things that you've learnt and other colleagues have learnt over the last 40 years.
Absolutely.
That knowledge was sitting there.
Yeah. That knowledge might as well never have happened as far as the COVID-19 epidemic developed without the involvement of vitamin D. Was it ignorance? Well, the people shouldn't have been ignorant. I was an ordinary physician in an ordinary hospital in an ordinary town. Well, surely people in the academic centre should have known about this. See, it was predictable that the obese, the South Asian ethnic people, Black African ethnic people, the poor people and the elderly, it was inevitable that they would succumb to COVID-19 in a big way, and they did. And it was ignored. It was preventable.
And you anticipated this?
Yeah, I anticipated it. And so did others as well. And we did our best to try and bring the importance of vitamin D to the attention of public health and government. But they didn't want to know, quite frankly. Everything was rejected. And so we finished up with, in 2020, there were about 80,000 deaths from COVID-19 in 2020. Well, which was more than we had with Hong Kong flu. That wasn't anticipated. We can look at these. If you look at the next slide,
please.
You say you're eating. Yeah. If you look at this, this shows, for example, an example of vitamin D produced. It says here, without sunscreen and with sunscreen. And we can see without sunscreen, we had a lot of vitamin D produced after exposure to vitamin D. With sunscreen, vitamin D synthesis is basically blocked.
So it goes right up here when we've got the vitamin without sunscreen, the natural exposure to the sun.
Yeah. Now, without sunscreen, you can say that is a white skin.
Mm-hmm.
but the body has produced its own sunscreen, melanin in the skin, and so dark skins have their natural sunscreen.
Mm-hmm.
So dark skins produce less vitamin D with a given exposure to sunlight. And now we can come on. Just to emphasise what happens, if you just move to the next slide.
Yeah. Well, what fascinates me here is that the whole reason for us turning white when we evolved coming out of Africa would be to make more vitamin D.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'd still have dark skins.
We would absolutely wouldn't have survived.
Yeah. So just go.
Okay, you're going to use it. Now, here we just see.
Yeah, that's the next one, isn't it? Yeah.
This is what happens. Just to refresh memories.
Yeah.
The body creates a substance called 7-dehydrocholesterol, 7-DHC. This is an oil, and it was first produced 1.5 billion years ago by plankton. And that's how fish get vitamin D. They can't produce vitamin D. They're in the ocean, or they're covered with scales. Fish cannot produce vitamin D, but they can eat it when they eat plankton. And that's why fish are rich in vitamin D. Now, here's the vitamin D produced by the action of the sun on this single bond within the molecule of 7-DHC. And when that happens, vitamin D is formed. I won't go into further details about that for now. But what happens next slide.
So this whole thing's in the skin.
That's produced in the skin.
The sun kind of cleaves this bit off and we get this activated bit left. Yeah.
It changes shape.
Yeah.
Once that is broken, the shape changes and it becomes known as vitamin D.
Yeah.
Now, this is what happens in the young people. Now, young people, we get this big increase in vitamin D and exposure to the sun, ultraviolet light. Now, young people have nice oily skin, but as we get older, our skin becomes dry.
I've noticed.
It does. Our skin becomes dry because the elderly skin does not produce 7-DHC. One of the main features of aging is the change in the skin. And so elderly people, we can see here, they produce very, very little vitamin D. It makes very little difference compared to young people.
Huge.
Elderly people are inevitably deficient in vitamin D unless they take a supplement or unless they eat oily fish twice a day. You can put elderly people in care homes out in the sun for as long as you like, but they will not produce vitamin D. So the elderly people, therefore, like the people with melanin, with dark skins, are inevitably vitamin D deficient.
So just to recap, what he was saying is that he spent a lot of time studying the effects of vitamin D on the immune system, and he knew going into the pandemic that the elderly, if you had darker skin and if you had poor eating habits, so if you were overweight or obese, you would be the main target for COVID. You would be less likely to survive the COVID because you have not as much vitamin D in your system. And a little later, they're going to talk about how vitamin D triggers your immunity response. So let's see if we can move forward a little bit. You kind of get the gist on that. So let's see here. This is interesting right here when they talk about this.
And the obese would have vitamin D deficiency.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So this is one picture of the of healthcare workers who died from COVID-19.
Yeah.
We can see quite clearly that the people with dark skins, Black African and South Asian immigrant ethnicity, were overrepresented.
Yeah.
And it was terrible to see it. This next slide.
Yeah. These are people that die.
These are people who died.
So,
Not all of them. Let me just look. The average age of death was 87.9 years.
In white doctors.
In the white ethnic doctors.
Yeah, yeah.
If you look at the black African and South Asian immigrant doctors, the age range is entirely different. The age range is between 46 and 72. Wow. And the average age of death was 62. 62, 25 years younger than the white doctors. Now, this has been published in the British Medical Journal every week through 2020. I don't think I'm the only one who reads it from the back or looks at it or looks at the ages of death. But nevertheless, this is the information that's available. And it's terrible to see that. Why?
On this slide here, they're showing the difference in the ages of the deaths of the doctors that were treating the COVID patients, and basically the white doctors had a longer life than the black or brown doctors because of the level of vitamin D, because if you have a darker pigment of your skin, it's more of a natural sunscreen, and so you don't produce as much vitamin D. Let's see. Let's move forward. Let's move to, let's see, right here.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very much so. It's tragic. This is just looking at blood vitamin D levels again.
Yeah.
And this time it's in Israel. Yeah. And Israel, the population of Israel, or the nation of Israel, gets far more sun than the population of Blackburn and Accrington.
Just a bit.
But we can see that half the population here had a blood level less than 20 nanomoles per mil.
So there's a very low level here.
Sorry, less than 20 nanograms per mil, or less than 50 nanomoles per litre. Yeah. We do have these two units in circulation.
Now, this is a bit confusing sometimes. So typically in the States we measure this in nanograms per mil.
Yeah.
Typically in the UK, because we've gone System International, we have it in nanomoles per litre.
We do indeed.
But the conversion is 2.5.
It is. The hospitals in Galilee, and they had access to records of the vitamin D levels taken a year or more before the COVID pandemic arrived.
So this graph is showing you a correlation with the folks in Israel that were COVID-19 critical in correlation with having really low vitamin D levels.
And then they looked at the people who are critically ill, that means in intensive care with COVID-19, and they were able to look through the records and find out what their blood levels of vitamin D were before the pandemic occurred. And there they are. And we can see that no one on the critical care unit had a blood level of vitamin D above 75 nanomole.
It's intensive care time.
Very absolutely.
So the next slide they're going to talk about is basically how vitamin D works in the system, and they talk about the sun and then the food, and then also they talk about a supplement a little bit later. But the sun is the slowest process. The food would be the secondary fastest process, and then a supplement that they actually start prescribing to people in Spain and Italy, and it's a supplement, especially for the older people, that puts vitamin D back into the system really quick. So basically, if you've watched up to this point, basically if you have a darker pigment skin, if you're elderly, or if you're overweight, the chances of your vitamin D levels being very low or very high, which in turn means that you are at higher risk for many illnesses and many medical issues. But definitely when you have something like a COVID or a pandemic or a flu or a respiratory virus or anything that is very highly contagious, the chances of you getting it and then fighting it and coming out successful are a lot lower because of your vitamin D levels. And there's several things you can do to get your vitamin D levels up. A lot of people don't even realize if you feel really crummy all the time, it could be because you have a lack of vitamin D in your system. But you could spend more time in the sun, do not wear sunscreen, eat more oily fish, eat more fish, and then get a vitamin D supplement, which I put a link in the description, so you can go click on that. And that one was prescribed to me by a doctor. Well, you don't have to get a prescription for it, but that's the one the doctor recommended, and I do feel much better.
Yeah, indeed. Yes,
they're very expensive places to keep people in.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I want to demonstrate on this slide, it's a bit blurred, I'm afraid to say, but the skin produces 70 hydrocholesterol.
So this is the oily stuff that I'm starting to lack now I'm getting older.
That's right. The skin produces, if you're young enough.
Yeah.
And some converts it into cholecalciferol, vitamin D, also known as calcifediol or calcidiol.
Yeah.
And the liver converts that. It gets absorbed, and then the liver converts it very slowly into the blood circulating 25-OHD.
This is the calcifediol, is it?
That's the one. Yeah, indeed. And that circulates in the blood, and when it's required, it's taken up into the target cells, which are the cells of immunity in the main.
So basically what they're saying is that you need sun exposure to produce the vitamin D, and it takes time. So your vitamin D levels don't come up after one day out in the sun. It's a process. And then it is stored and used to activate your target cells and your immune system to fight off bacteria, infections, viruses, whatever it may be. Then your vitamin D levels drop as your body uses it, and then it has to be restored. So if you got really sick and you didn't actively try to bring your vitamin D levels up, or you may not even know your vitamin D levels were down, but you got sick, now your vitamin D levels are even lower because your body needed what it had to fight off, whatever infection or virus you had.
Well, there are a lot of other cells as well, but we're talking about immunity cells, and that is very, very rapid. And that converts into the 125, which is the active ingredient.
So this conversion here converts it. And this is the calcitrol, this one, isn't it?
Yes.
This next graph here.
Because it's pretty likely I'm going to get exposed to sunburn in a few weeks' time.
Like the people in Israel, the ones who've got good levels of vitamin D, above 40.
So this graph shows you, this shows days in the bottom. So here's 1, 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 40. So it's 40, 50 days to get your vitamin D levels up to the level they should be. Around 70 is what they should be. But it's a process. It takes many, many days for this to happen. Then they're going to show you a graph in a second with taking a supplement.
Didn't die or become critically ill.
Yeah, but that was based on vitamin D that taken or been exposed to sunshine in the weeks before.
Yeah, a year before.
Before,
yeah,
right, wow.
Yeah. Now then, we come on to the critical one of the 25-OHD, also known as calcidiol it was calcidiol, now it's calcifediol. It's been changed a bit. And now we can see this is given by mouth. So it doesn't have to go through the liver.
This is the activated form that the liver would normally produce.
Yeah.
And we're taking a shortcut. We're actually giving this one.
Yeah, we are.
As a tablet.
We're bypassing the liver.
We're bypassing the liver. Yeah.
So we're giving what the liver does produce.
Yeah.
And we can see how quick does it go up? Is it 2 weeks? 3 weeks? No.
Wow. It's 2 hours.
Yeah, 2 hours.
Wow.
Not 2 weeks, 2 hours.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. So if people are critically ill, there's no point in taking vitamin D in its raw form. We've got to take it in its pod-activated form, 25-OHD, calcifidiol. And the speed of action is dramatic.
Yeah.
And
I understand that. I'm not even a physician. That's incredible.
It is. And this is known, and this has been published, and this was known before the pandemic.
Yeah.
So let's see this in practice.
Wow, that is seriously fast.
Now we can see, this is a bit out of sequence, but it doesn't matter. This is vitamin D on the need for ICU support with COVID-19 pneumonia.
Yep.
Red is bad and yellow is good.
These are patients in intensive
Red means
care.
you're on intensive care.
Not good.
That's right.
So if you don't understand what they're showing you here, this is showing that 50% of these people that got COVID needed to go to ICU. And the ones that had high vitamin D levels, it was 1% that only needed ICU. So that's a substantial difference. That is a huge difference of, staying out of ICU, staying out of the hospital altogether, and a much quicker recovery.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, this was done in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can see these are what you call the control patients. Now, controls on the right, 26 controls.
Yeah.
They were given standard high quality care. Fit we get the...
We're going to move a little forward now that, it's pretty obvious. And if you want to watch the whole video, there'll be a link in the description. But it's very obvious the importance of your vitamin D levels. And if you think about it, we spend a lot of time indoors. We eat stuff in boxes. We eat food that's cooked fast. We don't eat the right foods. We fill our bodies with sugar and sodas. So it's only natural to understand that our vitamin D levels would not be right because we obviously don't take good care of ourselves. Most of us don't. So now they're going to talk about the second pandemic. So a lot of people don't realize, but there is another pandemic that is going on, and they're going to talk about it right here.
Excess deaths in the beginning of 2020, and then we get a compensatory reduction.
Exactly what I was going to say.
That's what you get. Yeah, indeed. So that's what we'd like to have seen in this country. But unfortunately, it doesn't always happen like that. And we were not allowed to give the treatment for COVID-19. Now, what happened in New Zealand is the strange thing is that we got through 2020, which was the pandemic of COVID-19, and suddenly we hit 2021, and the deaths go up again.
So here we've got 2021 and the deaths up. So
yeah, just to understand what they're talking about, this is the pandemic. This is on the back half of the pandemic when they shut everything down. You can obviously see how everything just died off. All the COVID started to die off. And then everything was shut down for a period of time. And then when things started to reopen, the deaths spiked again. And now you can look in 2022, they spiked. And then if you look at 2023 data, it spiked again. And so people are dying at a rapid rate post-pandemic. And they're going to talk about it.
Deaths in the pandemic. You would expect it. Deaths went down.
Yeah, compensation reduction.
At-risk people have only died.
Only died once.
So why on earth would they go?
So it goes up again, and it's continuing and continuing.
Even higher here.
Yeah, in 2022.
And New Zealand is not the only country where this is happening.
No, absolutely, it is worldwide. And this is taken from our World in Data, which is a website anybody can look at, excess deaths. Going up there, 30% excess deaths in March 2022. Now, I could show this for loads and loads of countries, but I don't want to bore you. This is just a good example.
We have shown this for several countries, the United States, Canada, Australia, United Kingdom.
That's right.
Quite a few Western sophisticated countries. in pandemic is a fair way to.
So that was the excess death. So the best way to describe that is they actually have, there's actually a number of people, a range of people that should die every year because birth rates are pretty consistent. The death rate is also pretty consistent. And the graph that you're seeing there and the graph you're going to see next, these are excess deaths. So this is saying that these are numbers way above the normal death rate.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
This is very interesting information from Germany. Yearly excess mortality of these 3 years, 2020, 2021, 2022. And we can see in 2020 there were not many excess deaths.
But you would expect a lot more in the pandemic year.
You would. Now, the interesting thing is if we look at the 90 to 120 age group, towards the end, there were very few excess deaths, which is very surprising. What would have happened is that the ones who were going to die in the first half of 2020 did do, and the ones who were going to die in the second half of 2020 also did do. So, averaged out, there were no deaths in the second half of 2020. People didn't die because they died in the first half instead. The interesting thing is also that the number of children dying in 2020 was right down. Minus 6% childhood deaths. Well, they weren't at school. They weren't playing out. They weren't getting run over.
What does that kind of tell you about our school systems? I'm sure this is just Germany, but obviously, when the death rate, the excess death rate falls off in children from 0 to 14 because they're not in school, I mean that just makes you think. That makes you think. But then the big question you got to ask yourself is what happened in 2021 and 2022, and they don't have the one for 2023, but it's even greater. So why are these excess deaths happening? What is the one thing that was forced on us all right around here that is causing all this?
There were no cars on the roads, so it was safe for the children in terms of their physical state. Not so safe in regard to their mental state of things, should I say. So we can see in 2021, deaths were higher than in 2020. Children's deaths were not quite as low. Children started to go back to school. And in 2022, we can see the deaths, excess deaths are far higher. And it wasn't just in the elderly, it was in the ones where the arrow is. 15
young people.
Yeah, young adults. From 15.
Great. So we've got from naught, certainly from 15-year-olds.
What they're talking about now is this is 0 to 50-year-olds. These are excess deaths. So you have a bunch of people from 15 to 29 and 30 to 40 that are dying at a high rate extra over the death rate. And this is way out of norm. This only happens in times of war where you have something like this happen. And this is happening right now in 2023 at an even greater rate than 2022 and 2021.
Yeah.
30-year-olds, people in the 40s.
Yes, it's very certain. The age group 15 to 40 have got the highest deaths there. The people in the age group 50 to 59 is low for reasons which I couldn't.
The last time people from 15 to 50 died at this level, this excess death rate, was World War II. Couldn't say that.
Possibly understand. Yeah. But the elderly also had excess deaths. So you expect that
in Germany, as in other countries.
Yeah.
Higher deaths in young people.
Yeah.
In 2021.
That's the point. Yeah.
And more people dying.
That's right. Yes, indeed. Absolutely. Yeah. That's clear. Now then, we can't escape the thought the supposition that vaccinations might be responsible.
Or partly responsible.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's something that's changed in the population.
Yeah.
So it should be considered as a possible cause.
If we've got something that's occurred since 2020, it's either the after effects of the virus or it's the effects of the vaccination. We can't ignore it. You know, it's like the post office ignoring the computer, the Horizon computer.
And we're getting to the point where we're going to stop the video, but I'm going to hit this last part. And they talk about how vitamin D helps trigger your immune system.
This shows, excuse me, this shows once again the activation process of vitamin D. We've got, as I say, coming from food or skin, vitamin D, activated in the liver, and then entering the blood in reserve. That is the reservoir, the reserve of vitamin D is held in the blood as calcifidiol, 25-OHD calcifidiol.
This is the one.
It's held in the blood.
This is the one we measure.
That's what's measured, yes, indeed. And when it's required, it's taken up from the blood into the cells. And here we have the immunity cells, the interesting ones.
So this could be something like, I don't know, a lymphocyte or a...
Yeah, that's right.
Monocyte.
Yeah, absolutely. In particular, it's the T cells, the important ones.
T lymphocytes.
Yeah, T lymphocytes. So we can see that the 125 calcitriol or calcifidiol goes up. Another age group is added. It's now 125 OHD calcitriol.
Yeah, this was the slow reaction.
Yeah,
this is
the quick one.
Yeah.
Quick, instantaneous almost.
Yeah.
And it combines with VDR, the vitamin D receptor, and also RXR, which is related to vitamin A, and it activates. This combination activates the genes, the nucleus genes, the genes in the nucleus, to cause the cell to produce defensive proteins, or go into a defensive mode, and these defensive proteins get into the tissue fluid, and that's how bacteria and viruses are effectively killed and controlled and killed. So this is what's going on. The stimulus of immunity cells using up calcitriol. Now the point is that calcitriol, a molecule of it, can only be used once. And after it's been used to activate the cells with VDR, it's deactivated.
Okay, so what he's talking about now is once the compound that the vitamin D in your body created is used, it's gone. And so this is showing how if you caught COVID, your vitamin D levels dropped. And basically what we should be doing is we should be living a lifestyle that keeps our vitamin D levels up, which keeps us healthy and able to fight off viruses and bacteria and different things. So anyway, we're going to stop the video right there. I would just encourage you to do those three things. Number one, stop using sunscreen. Now, I'm not saying go out there and just get roasted in the sun, but if you think about it from a natural perspective, as the springtime comes around, it's not 100 degrees on the first day of spring, but you should be outside in the springtime. You should be out there soaking up the spring sun and the summer sun. And if you soak up the spring sun, you'll be ready for the summer sun. But I'm not saying go out there on July 1st and you've been indoors for a whole year. No, that's going to be painful and a lot of suffering. But if you go out there regular and you spend time outdoors, out in the sun, you're going to feel better because your vitamin D levels will be up. You'll have more energy. You'll be less sickly. The next thing you need to do is you need to add more fish to your diet. You need to eat more fatty, oily fish. And the last thing you should do is go to the description and order that stuff. It's like $28-30, I think it is. It's not that expensive. And start putting vitamin D into your system right now, not only to feel better, but to protect yourself. So I hope this was useful. I wanted to share this with you because I personally have experienced this. So this is not like our normal content we produce here at the Full Life Crew, but I wanted to share this with you because I have actually experienced this. I suffered with a chronic respiratory issue that was to the point to where it was, I couldn't sleep at night. It was terrible. And if you listen to some of our podcasts and our videos, you'll hear me coughing a lot in them. And that was part of the issue. And now that I've raised my vitamin D levels and been eating better and trying to spend more time in the sun when the sun's available, here we're in the winter, I feel much better. And the respiratory issue has faded away. Joint pain has kind of gone away. A lot of joint pain has faded away. So if you want to feel better, if you want to be healthier, and if you want to be able to fight off whatever next is coming, then I highly recommend you go to that link and get that supplement. Alrighty, have a good one.